been a topic of discussion between Josh Kun and I for a little while, and it's a relief to finally get rolling. Just to say one more thing, and then I'll hand the baton to Josh. LACE has been around now for 30 years, and we've been really committed to artists of all disciplines and really looking at what it is about to be a part of a creative community and also an inspiration to and with each other. So a series like the listening parties, I think, is going to be a really fantastic opportunity for us to come together, share, look, be in dialogue, as well as listen. So with that said, Josh, thank you so much.
We're all so happy you guys are here. This is also a merger of the interests of LACE and the Popular Music Project at the Norman Lear Center that is run out of the USC Annenberg School. And I guess first and foremost, our goal in putting these together was just Carol and I both share beyond the love of music, the belief that music can actually create conversations that aren't otherwise possible. And that are really kind of rich opportunities to bring various kind of ways of thinking across in the space of sound. And so we wanted to try to do these events out, but specifically to do so in the realm of questioning the impact of the playlist, mobile technologies, and how that has impacted the way we listen and the way we think about sound. Hopefully we've all made a mixtape before we made a playlist in this room. So I think the aesthetic of the mixtape, the aesthetic of the playlist is really important. And so really the goal behind these evenings was pretty simple, is I've asked various individuals to come up with a single theme, a single playlist of songs, and you have about 45 minutes, or, if you sing and dance, like a certain song we know, that you will know in a moment, a little bit longer than 45 minutes. And to create a kind of live musical lecture, a live audio essay, a live song and dance, digital vaudeville, whatever you want to call it, that explores the theme through the soundscape of the playlist. And so when I started thinking about this, I immediately thought, I know this person named Karen Tongson, who is pretty much a master of the playlist as a way of not just documenting a world, but creating one while she does it. So you're in for a real treat tonight, and I just want to give a very warm welcome to our first listening party host, Karen Tongson.
My dramatic, this setup has been called alternately Glengarry, Glen Ross, Spalding Gray, Pixar. So thank you all for showing up on this Tuesday night. I know it's a happening party evening in LA. And most of all, thank you to Carol Stakinas here at LACE and to Josh Kun for inviting me to come and, kind of share my obsessions with all of you. And as some of you may know, I'm writing a book right now about sexuality and race in the Southern California suburbs. And while the project is an academic one, my archive itself is actually assembled out of the materials of everyday life, kind of everyday culture. And that includes things like TV shows, performances, books, movies, and pop music that create something in our imaginary that we call the suburbs. Might not necessarily always create a real suburb, but it creates something in our imaginary called the suburbs. And I think that there's a potential for these, items of everyday life to transform what that location might mean. Somebody else has a playlist going in the room. So tonight I'm going to be sharing some of the music that not only inspires this project that I'm working on called Relocations, but frankly, it's also the music that poses a distraction to the project as well. And so tonight you're going to hear something that's not necessarily a literal translation of the suburbs, although there's going to be some of that. So you're not just going to get an evening of songs about the suburbs. So no Pleasant Valley Sunday, no Jesus of Suburbia, no Penny Lane in our ears, in our eyes, beneath the blue suburban skies. Although there will be occasional kind of real kind of correspondences between the two things. So first things first, I want to start with something that you're probably expecting me to do, so let's just kind of get it out of the way. First slide, please.
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes all the same.
Okay, so some of you are familiar with the Showtime series Weeds. And actually that set of clips is my first experiment at kind of film editing, so apologies if it looks like the menswear challenge on Project Runway. And, you know, I tried as best as I could to kind of suture together several versions of that song. The first version you have is by Malvina Reynolds. That's the original version. The second is by Death Cab for Cutie. The third, Angelique Kidjo, and the final version, Persephone's Bees. And the reason I kind of wanted to start with this track is because, for me, it represents the kind of expectation around the suburbs, always kind of replicating itself, always being the same, and yet somehow kind of manifesting itself through these different and various interpretations. A little bit about the song, about the original. Malvina Reynolds was born to a family of Jewish socialist immigrants in San Francisco in 1900, on my exact birthday, actually. And she actually got a PhD at Berkeley, too, in romance philology in 1938. Anyway, a few years after she got her PhD and figured that romance philology wasn't, you know, the thing that was going to get her a job or anything like that, she decided to do folk music instead, you know, much more profitable. So she wrote Little Boxes in 1972 while she and her husband were driving from Berkeley to the South Bay for a Friends Committee on Legislation meeting, which is a Quaker-founded organization. And as her biographers note, she was driving through Daly City when inspiration struck and she said, "Bud," which is her husband's name, "take the wheel, I feel a song coming on." And that's how Little Boxes was born. And, you know, it's striking that this song, for me, like actually, you know, I didn't know this before I decided to start with the song, but I think it's all too appropriate that the song ended up being, you know, inspired by Daly City. Because as some of you Pinoys in the house must know, maybe some non-Pinoys as well, that it's one of the very few communities in the U.S. that's, including Rowland Heights and Monterey Park, with a majority Asian population. And it's the only one with a majority Filipino population. And so I thought that there was an interesting set of convergences there. I immediately thought, what would Josh Kun say about this audiotopian moment? And so today I want to pursue, you know, the kind of incidents of convergence, the social, political, race, class, and I would add queered sort of sentiments, feelings mapped in the slight variations of a song. And we're going to talk more about how all of this works, how this works through Audiotopia as well, which is a concept from Josh's book. But for now, I'd like to think of our foray into Little Boxes as something that kind of measures this fluctuation in the suburbs, a fluctuation between stasis and rapid development. Things are always the same, and yet constantly being paved over for something newer, bigger, or more convenient. And tonight's playlist will be scaled according to this tension between sedentariness, kind of being stuck in the suburbs, and movement. It's inspired by commutes and micro-migrations across freeways, as well as by immigration. So none of what you're about to hear tonight is especially collector-driven or obscure. You can find it almost anywhere, which I think is really befitting a culture of convenience, music befitting a culture of convenience. But like the multiple versions of Little Boxes you just heard, the songs you'll hear will capture some of the accents and also accent elimination of spaces prior and still unforeseen. I was always fascinated by that scene, the opening scene of My Fair Lady, where Henry Higgins is in Covent Garden, and he's listening to people, and he starts to taxonomize their accents. And he comes across who I consider his, kind of future gay lover, Colonel Pickering, and says, Cheltenham, Harrow, Cambridge, and India, after he hears him speak. And, a flaccid scholarly friendship is forever born. I'd like to think that, like Henry Higgins, music maps accents as they traffic to, through, between, and among the suburbs and their companion spaces, both imagined and real. And so some of the accents you're going to hear tonight come from back and forth across the Pacific, between Southern California and Southeast Asia, from Hawaii all the way across the pond to the UK. And so let's think a little bit about this notion of accent with little boxes, and let's kind of hear it again for just a second. Can we hear some of that again? Point number one about accents. Okay, accents can be rhythmical. Okay, so from this clip you've got the kind of folky, strummy, like, driving like guitar, kind of lilting. And then by the time you get to Death Cab for Cutie, you have this staccato kind of indie, and I think it's maybe even 5/8 like beat in the background. And then you have something like, in the next clip, Angelique Kidjo's vocally driven cadence, right? And it's derived kind of from post-colonial, polyrhythmic, West African and Caribbean choral styles. And then you finally close with the rattle of Russian folk and Balkan drums rumbling from Persephone's bees, and that closes that set. And, accents can also be tonal. So, you can hear different voices, different intonations of what they're speaking. And accents can simply be just kind of an accent, right? Like you have the kind of folky twang, the over-enunciated schoolboy indie rock intonation of Death Cab, some post-colonial cosmopolitan accent of Angelique Kidjo, or it's sung in another language altogether, like the Persephone's Bees piece. And so accents change and yet remain the same, revealing themselves in some small way. I'd like to think tonight that not everyone in the suburbs is middle class, not everyone in the suburbs is white, not everyone in the suburbs chose to go there, not everyone in the suburbs hates it, not everyone in the suburbs has a car, not everyone in the suburbs has a house, and not every suburb is a suburb. So we're going to go ahead and listen to some of the music that kind of made or created that space for me, the suburbs. And so bear with me, even if some of these songs sound all too common, straight off the rack. Because while it may be music you've heard and seen before, my hope is that you'll leave without hearing it the same way again. So let's take a ride. The dogs in the back are reacting. Suburbia. In ancient Rome, it was the area designated for both noxious land uses and housing for those too poor to afford the protection of city walls. Apropos my previous remarks about Audiotopia and Josh Kun's concept, Neil Tennant, aka the brains of the Pet Shop Boys, rightly proclaimed in a magazine interview that suburbia is the word suburb and utopia smashed together. The song itself flirts sonically with a utopian, easy-listening motif. The keyboard riff, for example, in the chorus right here. You can kind of hear that smooth sailing, that then kind of, you break a window and then you hear the kind of dystopian heart of darkness in the middle of the song. The barking dog enhancements and the car crash samples from the emulator. Even the song's opening chords, actually, with the dogs barking, have a kind of Death Star gravitas to them. And then the suburban piano there, that lightens the mood a little bit, right? You can see, you think of it as a suburban piano lesson. So it's a sonic suburbium that's at once kind of a light and easy sweetness and light of suburbia mixed with kind of the noxious news of what suburbia represents. So in this middle break, you have the kind of rioting and the blight of Brixton, packs of feral trash-eating dogs in Toxteth, okay? That's sort of what's happening right here at this big dramatic build in the song. And in an interview, Neil Tennant says that this song describes a riot happening, and it sums up why we're having this riot. I only wanted something else to do but hang around. And that's the problem of suburbia. People are bored. And so the song cleaves itself in a strange way to the city with its disco beat, layered over with a melody so good it could be a jingle, right? Tennant always claimed that the Pet Shop Boys' goal was to write disco music with undisco lyrics. And according to Chris Lowe, aka the looks and the brawn of the Pet Shop Boys, the bass line for this song is actually cribbed from Madonna's Into the Groove. And you can definitely hear that. Can we have a little volume so we can especially turn it up a little bit? Listen to the bass line if you can. Get into the groove, or you got to, okay, right? Okay. And Tennant calls the song catchy, and Lowe calls it corny, right? And that about sums up the affective force of suburban music in general, the catchy and the corny, right? Something with a little herb to it, and yet so sweet you can't stop yourself from having too much. So it's something that very well could be boring, but it's the kind of boring that gives you an itch to make something happen, what the song tells us. We can turn it up all the way. We're going to get back to that quote that's on the board. Where's the policeman when you need one to blame the color TV? The idea that, you blame the TV for everything that's wrong with society. That's kind of like one of the reasons that, the youth fester in suburbia, is their attachment to the TV. And, but one of the kind of source texts for the Pet Shop Boys song, Suburbia, was actually this film.
Meet the kids from suburbia. There's Jack.
When you have the thrill of coffee.
Sheila. Joe.
I could be the only one.
And Ethan.
I feel kind of scared.
You'll love him. Or hate him.
Metal Weekend running wild on our street.
Yours and mine. Well, I'm damn sure they aren't mine.
They're home.
This is the best summer many of us ever had. Besides, we ain't with each other. We wouldn't have anything.
And no one's going to take it away from them.
Oh, shut up! You molested your own daughter, you scumbag.
A new movie about a new generation. Suburbia.
So Suburbia was directed by Penelope Spheris, who also, it's actually widely sort of acknowledged that Suburbia is the fictionalization of her decline of Western civilization. And in a kind of, sort of a twist of fate that kind of affirms like the trajectory of Suburbia, she ended up directing Wayne's World. Anyway, I love it that the Anglo African-American police chief and the dad with the Prince Valiant hairdo have amazing lesbian fashion. The members only jacket and that plaid shirt, cowboy plaid shirt. Anyway, I wanted to show that clip because, that's what Neil Tennant suggested, really was sort of the inspiration, at least textually for Suburbia. But I want to turn now to some of the sonic influences and to kind of think about that layering over that dark underbelly of Suburbia that we have represented in the film. And so let's look at let's listen to the first sonic influence of the song, other than Into the Groove. Next song. And it's right here at this part, when we get to the opening. Let's take a ride, run with the dogs tonight in suburbia. Okay? And this is actually an acknowledged melody that they kind of pulled from. And they said that that's what they wanted to overlay that disco beat that they stole from Madonna, right? Now let's just play this song out. It's not too long. It feels so good. So let's turn it up a little bit. Love that flugelhorn, right? Thank you, Hollywood Bowl. And even just the whole concept of feels so good, right? I mean, you have this kind of jazz fusion song amped up a little bit, with a touch of funk and disco in like the late 70s. But it has that same sort of vibe. You think of, kind of your parents listening to maybe Herb Alpert or would my parents have listened to that? My parents were actually listening to Chuck Mangione, but a kind of Dave Brubeck, maybe gone a little more funky. Okay, that's sort of what. But that's kind of like what think of Cocktail Time, the Suburbs, what would happen there. Anyway, part of what hearing this sonic influence on Suburbia made me think, or rather led me to another piece of jazz fusion that was popularized and actually made, well, I don't know if it was popularized, but it was certainly made for TV. And let's hear that influence on maybe, I don't know if it's a direct influence on Suburbia, but I think it's very similar. Let's hear it. Take a ride, run with the dogs tonight in Suburbia. You can hide, run with. You can actually sing Suburbia over this a lot longer than you can over Feel So Good. Anyway, let's bring the volume down a little bit. part of what, the reason that I chose to go with Alf at this particular transitional moment is to get rather obliquely at the impact television has on suburban listening practices. And, as you can see, there is something of an IKEA hacker sensibility to what we might imagine as suburban music or suburban refrains. Does everyone know what an IKEA hacker is? It's you take, for example, your M4's coffee table, and you take the parts from that, and you find parts from another, like a clip-on sofa or something, and you remix it, and you turn it into something that actually is unique, right? There's an actual site now, like IKEAhacker.com, that allows you to do that, and it feels more DIY, like you're in, right? But anyway, this whole IKEA hacker sensibility, kind of what I've toured you through with, Suburbia, through Feel So Good, through Gordon Shumway, Alf's real name, is that I think that's the kind of ingenuity we might imagine happening in the suburbs. At some point, the little boxes that all look the same start to become more and more customized. A little awning there, a little landscaping here. So in other words, spaces themselves become accented, right? And of course, there are gated communities that have restrictions on these things. You can't paint your door blue, this kind of thing. But especially if you kind of work your way through the Southern California's working class suburbs, you can now drive through these subdivisions populated by communities of color priced out of the city and see customization start to happen. There's actually a wonderful bit of work by the scholar Mary Davos about certain communities in Chicago in which this is happening, right? Like kind of the ethnicization of suburban tract developments. And you can see this also in the movie Friday, or Next Friday with Ice Cube, but I won't talk more about that. So how do spaces and songs become accented? What would my suburban soundscape be accented by? Okay. Unlike the policeman in the Pet Shop Boys song, I would never blame the TV or say we're all manipulated by the idiot box. Maybe there's a way for us to actually see and hear in television, or the music that we hear on television, something that is an echo of our own music, the echo of another music from another time and place through another medium, before video killed the radio star. Can we turn that? Wait, that's fine. That voice, okay, that voice belongs to none other than the Philippines' reigning grande dame of cinematic love teams and saccharine song stylings, Sharon Cuneta. In Mr. DJ, Sharon's 12-year-old croon sounds mature for its age, yet cultishly endearing. Mr. DJ was her breakout hit back in 1978, the same year my mom and I first left the Philippines to move to Hawaii. I was 5. Sharon Cuneta was my first unrequited crush. I mean, come on, how could a budding lesbo not fall in love with her or this song? She asks Mr. DJ, very politely, peppering her refrain with lots of thank yous and apologies, to play her favorite love song in case her dear heart might hear it and remember their time together. Sadly, her beloved is with someone else now, and the song itself has grown old. This is actually the song that would score my many movements back and forth across the Pacific before I'd ever make it to a tract home on the mainland in 1983. Even though the song is in Tagalog, something about it always anticipated America for me. And maybe it's the lilting, waltzing heartbreak that could very well be Doris Day's. Her voice scooping, mellifluously, threatening to get slightly behind the beat and fall completely into rubato. This is a song accented by empire, by that 50s all-American girl next door who always found great parking, as well as by her more wan cinematic echo in 1978, Olivia Newton-John as Sandra Dee in Grease. But there's also something undeniably and persistently Pinoy about it. And maybe that lilt is not just a waltz. Maybe it's the doubled up beats of a folk dance in the Visayas. And what about that special relationship Filipinos have to soft rock? What about our collective adulation of melody? Is it purely post-imperial reflex? A trace of the Spanish troubadours and Frankie Avalon gone haywire? Is this why the first record I bought when I moved to SoCal from Manila in '83 was Air Supply's Greatest Hits? I bought it from the Kmart where my mom worked her very first day job at the jewelry counter when there weren't enough singing gigs to keep us afloat. It's one of the few Kmarts actually left standing anywhere in California, same as it ever was on the corner of Arlington and Van Buren in Riverside, a monument towards an economy and taste culture too stubborn to hope. And in light of those soundscapes, maybe soft rock isn't a weakness, but a strength. The audacity to sound out of time while being fresh off the boat. Through Sharon Cuneta, we queerly wind our way back to the somewhere else's we all call home. Back to the catchy and back to the corny, even though the song has grown old. Naniluma ng panahon. So last year, far, far away from the suburbs of Southern California, deep in the heart of New York City. You remember that face behind us last week? No one does, apparently. I was asked to participate in a one-day symposium called After CBGB, What Next? Gender, Sexuality, and the Future of Subcultures. It was hosted at NYU. And I was asked to pick a clip that spoke to a future or a history of a subculture that I loved. And this filled me with a tremendous sense of anxiety. I mean, having seen the songs that I've just chosen, you know why. And I thought to myself, I had to pick something indisputably cool and therefore political. Something that wore its subcultural capital on its sleeve. Something punk rock. But when I thought about what I'd watched over and over again in the past several years, and actually something that harkened back to Sharon Cuneta and Mr. DJ, to my Mises and Empire, as well as to budding lesbianic crushes, I couldn't help but turn to this. Full volume, full volume. You don't know how I want to touch yours and hold you tight. Oh, you don't know how. Everybody. Feels so good. Anyway, so I would watch this clip on the Idol DVD. It was a gift. Anyway, and I watched it over and over again with my friend Lin Chan, the artist also known as JJ Shinwa. And we had the same reaction to this gaudy scene of unbridled vocal prowess mixed with a certain physical awkwardness. And what was our deal with Carrie Underwood and Alone? Were we just being a couple of post-suburban butch faggotrons reliving a forbidden lust for the high school prom queen circa 1991? She sure ain't in Chakota anymore, honey. Jesus, take the wheel. Lynn and I didn't even grow up in the same burbs. Very different ones, in fact, in opposite parts of the state. And she grew up in Northern California, in Cupertino, the cradle of the so-called creative classes and home of Apple, right? And I grew up in Riverside, as you may have heard earlier, home of Aurora Defense Manufacturing Plant that was shut down. And that defense plant had already replaced the citrus industries of yore. So what was it that actually brought us together in this clip if we had very different kind of demographically different suburban experiences? Was it the same thing that cemented our homosociality when we met in college, studiously repressing our suburban histories as we aspired towards indiedom, until we realized we could split the harmony parts to the chorus of Galileo and spit Hall & Oates' METHODOFLOVE without dropping a beat? Was it about the fact that our future as members of various subcultures would always be defined by an unacknowledged past, by a suburban and immigrant past we grew too ashamed to show? What about the subcultural desires that are spawned somewhere else, born in provinces or in the suburbs, in and around malls, in schoolyards after hours, or in the words of Alex Vasquez, on the slippery Naugahyde seats of a Dade County public school bus? Made in garages, as Christine Balance has written about, in basements, attics, public softball fields, radiant in twilight smog. It is, was, and will be in these transnational suburban hubs that we bump to Asian Latino freestyle. There that we conduct our Pinoy practices of everyday performance, like the karaoke in our parents' carport or the community rec center. And again, an homage, shout out to the industry sisters, Alex and Christine. What America understands as acts of idolatry are performances cribbed directly from an old Pinoy variety show, long before American Idol was born, a show called Student Canteen, where girls from the provinces, barrios, and shantytowns would break it gently to Angela Bofill. I do you better than you. Like Idol in the Pinays that have graced its neon backlit stages. Next slide. Jasmine Trias, Camille Velasco, AJ Tabaldo, who was apparently too fey and too brown for prime time, okay? And now the great Pinay hope from Miramar, Florida, Ramiel Malubay. Okay. AKA Lullaby, okay? Malubay, Lullaby, because of her penchant for singing ballads. So like Idol, Student Canteen continues to be beloved by the so-called Promdis, or Promdi provinces, watching the Filipino channel, TFC, and whose children remain provincial even after they've supposedly arrived in places like Torrance and West Covina. In these transnational suburban hubs, because let's face it, immigrants can't actually afford to live in cities anymore, we honed our subcultural skills through sing-alongs with our sisters or brothers, by choice more than blood, while we were all crammed together in Tita's Mazda MPV, also known as the Maraming Filipino van, which means lots of Filipino van, cruising down the 60 West, or insert your stretch of freeway, bridge, or tunnel here. This music isn't just the cry of a forgotten, and some would argue justifiably forgettable suburban past of arbitrary queer, brown immigrant musical discovery. Not from a precious little record store with snobby sales clerks, home skillet, but from the bins at Big's box shops like Kmart or the Warehouse or Towered Records, well stocked with Night Ranger. Maybe it's music accumulated through the dazzling new innovation that was the Columbia House catalog, 10 albums for a penny. These enticing credit-wrecking temptations came in the mail with invitations for our moms to wait for Ed McMahon to appear at the door with a fat novelty-sized check. And at this after CBGB conference, there was much lamentation about CBGB's rumored relo to Las Vegas. And I thought, well, maybe in the end, that's appropriate. Maybe subculture hasn't died. Maybe it's simply relocated. Relocated back to where it came from, but felt too embarrassed to name. Back to where the kids have nothing to do and don't give a damn about their bad reputation as freaks, geeks, immigrants, queers. It is there in the suburbs where you ultimately learned enough skills in your high school or church choir to bust alone apart on national television with open-throated ferocity. Your face framed by a JonBenet mane, slow winks of glittery Walmart eye makeup for emphasis. And it's also there where you sounded sweet and low, like the saccharine with the same name, like Karen Carpenter of Downey, California. She honed her chops as a female lyric tenor in the Long Beach State Choir before she and her brother Richard helped launch a musical form that would turn on our heartlights across the Pacific and back, with a little help from Tony Peluso's melodic guitar fuzz solo. In 1972, with Goodbye to Love, before there was a 710 freeway to slice across Long Beach, grazing El Sereno along the way, the Carpenters created the spark that would inevitably ignite the world with innumerable butane flames. I love that she's scatty with a guitar solo. It's really amazing. Aw. I promise it's not always this morbid. Aw. I was named after Karen Carpenter, for those of you who didn't know that, actually. I really was. So here's something a little more upbeat. Feel free to dance in your chairs if you like. Volume down a little bit. That is DeBarge, and that is the Rhythm of the Night. And some consider Rhythm of the Night the poor man's All Night Long by Lionel Richie. But there's actually, I actually think there's something so sweet and light and scamper, scamper, andro hooves about the song in El DeBarge's visual performance. That you would have to be heartless to refuse the joy it offers. It's like the world is all unicorns, cummerbunds, and scraggly mustaches. Rhythm of the Night was penned by the powerhouse pop composer Diane Warren. Unbreak My Heart, Because You Love Me, How Do I Live Without You, Hot Night by Laura Branigan, and Exposé's I'll Never Get Over You, Getting Over Me, numerous other songs. I think I Don't Want to Miss a Thing also. And Rhythm of the Night was featured in the Reagan-era studio film, Berry Gordy's The Last Dragon, Columbia TriStar Motown, 1985. And some critics have described The Last Dragon as blaxploitation light. And the movie thematizes Bruce Lee's iconic status in black pop culture. Case in point, the main character, Leroy Green's nickname is Bruce Leroy. Even though the film is set in New York City, you'll have noticed that most of the video for Rhythm of the Night is actually set in a kind of timeless version of the mid-century, okay? Popular in the 1980s. And all the action that takes place is pretty much in a 50s era convertible cruising down 8-lane roads past festive youthscapes. So like a drive-in burger joint where group dancing ensues, illuminated by headlights, as well as a gas station where more group dancing ensues, illuminated by headlights. Something that I'm writing about in the book Relocations, actually, is the idea that so much of suburban sociability transpires in cars, right? Driving around, looking for something to do. Maybe hoping for a group dance to break out in the 7-Eleven parking lot. while the Nissan beams make your shadows look pretty. There's actually an episode of the new sitcom Aliens in America set in a 7-Eleven parking lot. It's kind of like teeming new youth subculture, right? It parodied that concept. And there have been numerous films where there's kind of the losers hanging out at the 7-Eleven. Right? And many people would react to this idea, turning your parking lot into a party, like, wow, that's totally abject. But I would argue that there's actually something tremendously creative in those acts of transformation that turn a parking lot into a socialscape and a soundscape, without needing the crutch of cool to make something out of what isn't there. And I also think there's something special about turning convenience into pleasure. Feel free to sing along with the chorus. I feel like I'm a Sweet and Tender Hooligan show. By your side, it's such a heavenly way to die. Omnipotent control. While prepping for a class on fan cultures recently, I read a blog by a 25-year-old Chicano Morrissey fan from the suburbs of San Antonio, Texas. He reminisced about hearing the song for the first time in the car with his brother while they were driving around aimlessly seeking amusement in a bleak landscape of suburban and exuberant nothingness. I also thought about what a good friend of mine, the writer and performer Raquel Gutierrez of BDP, wrote about Morrissey, about how he invokes with his working class Irish Catholicism in Manchester, England, a version of Los Angeles spiritually significant to queer Latinas and Latinos, from City Terrace to Whittier, Pico Rivera to Linwood, Long Beach to Maywood, and through the 5, 10, 101, 60 freeway interchanges. Despite its morbidity and its leitmotifs of gentrification, please don't drop me home, I haven't got one. I just sang that one. For me, this song is actually about a queer of color sociability and self-creation being made beyond the vertical metropolis in lands of sage and sprawl. There's something to be said about the profundity of the car ride for the sake of the ride. Driving in your car through lonely stretches of Texas, Arizona, California, or elsewhere. Driving in your car with someone else, with significant others, not necessarily lovers, or are they? Desperately seeking excitement elsewhere, somewhere, but realizing it's all about the ride. The ephemeral and aimless movements of accidental reverie, and all about who you're riding with. Perhaps there is light that never goes out. Such moments of self and mutual discovery, through a pop song, figure of voice so seemingly remote from who we are, makes us so captivated by the company we've cobbled together that we want the pleasure and privilege of a 10-ton truck smashing into us to make it last forever. So this moment in rock has been sponsored by
music's commitment to bringing you new music in Southern California.
So British is the other accent I had in mind when I started this project, and I came to thinking about the music that really shaped the empires of my familiar, especially the Inland Empire, a place I don't imagine as a homogeneous accumulation of little boxes, but is truly a kind of crossroads of empire. Despite the region's much maligned name, I've come retrospectively to understand that it's all too fitting. From the defense industries that once resided there, making America strong, to the recreations of Spanish missionary culture in the area's downtown revivals, to the more genteel citrus-era Victorianism, affirming even now a Brit stranglehold on culture as well as anarchy, long after the sun has set beyond the British Empire. My suburban adolescence constantly toggled between the accented stylings of soft rock balladry, the smooth sounds of Pinoy culture you've heard so far or earlier, and the slinky, synthy sounds of of an imperial new wave. That much heralded second British invasion sold to the SoCal kids by Richard Blade, who's actually Richard Shepherd of Torquay, England. But he changed his name to Blade when he moved to LA in 1982 as an homage to the film Blade Runner. I want to talk just a little bit right now about what Richard Blade accomplished on shows like Video One and on Channel 9 and Video Beat on KTLA, MB3 also on Channel 9, as well as on K-Rock. In light of something called remote intimacies, and it's a phrase that I borrowed from the queer scholar Jennifer Terry, I personally imagine remote intimacies describing the fan cultures for whom intimacies cohere across virtual networks of desire, through the radio, music, and television, and now on the internet and through online friendship networks. Remote intimacies account both technically and affectively for the symbiosis that can happen between disparate subjects, between Latinos and Morrissey, for example, or between suburban queers of color and Anglophilic ear candy in general. For me, remote intimacies means something akin to imagining our own spaces in correspondence with others. Something like sister cities. We know that Cannes and Beverly Hills are sister cities. I actually should have looked up what Riverside's sister city would be. But unlike most urbanites who assume the suburban is always oriented to the closest city, I actually like to think that these imaginary correspondences can happen across greater distances, both conceptually and topographically, and with other ethnicities, accents, nations, and even other empires that feel more benevolent, though they surely aren't, simply owing to the fact that they weren't ours. And you know, I love Duran Duran because nothing seemed more exotic to me than Birmingham, England. Out here, where we're so far west, we're almost touching the east again. My adolescent mind didn't quite process the fact that all the locales in their videos had little to do with the Birmingham of my fantasies, but instead actually recaptured the colonial imaginaries of a British Empire restyled by Vivienne Westwood. Some new romantic looking for the TV sound on a redrawn planet Earth. Little did I know that Birmingham, in all of its gritty working class industrial glory, might have actually been closer to Riverside, California than I thought. And I'm not going to dwell on this thought much longer. Instead, I'm just going to play the next song for you in its entirety. And, you know, feel free to take a bathroom break. We're almost done, I promise. But maybe then you'll understand why I didn't so much let myself get captured by another empire, but made my own way towards something else by walking tall and jaunty like John Taylor's bass line. the song says, I'm going back to Manila. Or rather, I just went back for my first balikbayan journey as a grown-up without parental chaperones. And balikbayan translates literally to return to country in English, but refers in a more spiritual and colloquial sense to homecoming. And so the Pinoys and Pinays living permanently abroad who return to the country implicitly always have a country to return to. And so this last summer was my first time back since 1983, when I was 10 years old, and since I got my U.S. citizenship in 1989. So in preparation for this momentous trip, I browsed through the most recent Lonely Planet guide, published in June 2006 at the Borders bookstore at the Riverside Plaza after having lunch with my dad. And this is what it said. Despite years of injustice at the hands of colonial and homegrown rulers, and despite being for the most part dirt poor, Filipinos are the happiest people in Asia. This incongruous joie de vivre is perhaps best symbolized by that quirkiest of national icons, the jeepney. Splashed with color, laden with religious icons, and festooned with sanguine scribblings. The jeepney openly flaunts the fact that at heart, it's a dilapidated, smoke-belching pile of scrap metal. But like the jeepney, poor Filipinos face their often dim prospects in life with a laugh, a wink, and even a song. And this song actually, is by like one of the most popular kind of crossover disco pop bands in the Philippines. They're still popular now, but they're primarily popular in the 80s, called Hot Dog. And I always thought that Hot Dog was like an amazing name for, a pop band. Anyway, on July 17th, 2007, while I was indeed back in Manila, hopping on and off of jeepneys, this happened. Is there anyone who hasn't seen this video? Okay, there are a couple people who haven't. You guys know how to do this dance? You want to get up and do it right now? Okay, let's turn the volume down a little bit. So if you haven't seen it yet, this is the Cebu Provincial Detention and Rehabilitation Center, or CPDRC, inmates' dead-on reenactment of Michael Jackson's Thriller music video. This video affirmed for many that bit in the guidebook I cited a little bit earlier, that us plucky Pinoys still have it in us, even in the face of a remarkable increase in state-sanctioned violence. 2007 also marked the end of a 4-year moratorium on capital punishment, which was altogether abolished in 1986, but it crept back into the criminal justice system in 1993. The man who reintroduced the death penalty into Filipino law was a congressman named Pablo Garcia of Cebu. The man who choreographed the inmates' reenactments of Thriller, the Sister Act oeuvre, and Queen's Radio Gaga, among other pop hits, is Byron F. Garcia, the congressman's son. Byron choreographed the routines in his official capacity as consultant on security for the Cebu provincial government, a position he was appointed to by the governor of Cebu, Gwendolyn Garcia, his sister. Now, this tangled web of cronyism offers several alluring threads to pursue about how reenactments of American pop music videos might offer a dazzling foreground for a strange regional and family drama, as well as for national debates in the Philippines about crime and punishment. So, is this the real thriller in Cebu, the Garcia's bureaucratic and family drama? Without relinquishing the local political and familial context from which this video phenom emerged, I want to turn to the other meanings, kinships, disappointments, and triumphs made possible by the video's circulation that gave the video a life, or is it an afterlife of its own that extends now well into this year, the 25th anniversary of Michael Jackson's Thriller album. Oddly, this Thriller in Cebu video felt almost like an American intrusion to me when it first appeared embedded in video format, like in various social networking sites or in my email inbox. While I was checking all of this remotely, like awash in my balikbayan journey at home, right? In Iloilo and Manila. So a lot of people were asking me, is this real? What is this? Is this a hoax? What's up with that? And as my pal and performance studies scholar Christine Balance and I have collectively reflected, many Phil-Ams, Filipino Americans, shared this similar kind of experience of defamiliarization around this video. Even though Thriller in Cebu and its accompanying B-sides didn't seem all that spectacular or out of the ordinary given our soundscapes and our own audiovisual archives, it still felt very strange to kind of re-encounter it. While wallowing in my balikbayan journey, my sentimental balikbayan journey in Manila, I was awash in what Josh Kun has called an audiotopia by the book, one scored by the collective DJs of everyday life in the Philippines. The cab and jeepney drivers blasting their radios, the Palawan Idol winner singing extremes more than words, and Jabim classics between shifts tending bar at a beach, the Manila municipal government's swanky sound systems, the pipe-soothing soft rock in a Rizal Park, which is the city's monument to the slain hero, Jose Rizal. As Josh explains in the book, Audiotopia is the equivalent of a musical map, a musical you are here, that positions you within larger social worlds. Now, riffing eloquently on remarks made by the African-American poet Gene Toomer, he suggests that music transports us into different worlds, that we inevitably slide back into our own worlds. He adds that we, quote, slide back forever changed. And as we turn towards the last couple of songs tonight, I'd like to pump up the jam, or at least add what might actually be an excessive melismatic flourish to this notion of audiotopia, by saying that sometimes popular music is most utopian when it transports us deeper into the heart of our own worlds rather than to different ones. It's not just a sliding back and forth between worlds, but a glimpse at the sliding back and forth of our worlds. The kind of defamiliarization that doesn't conjure the stoniness of the stone, but the placeness of a place. Hearing again in Manila what I always thought of as my immigrant love songs, written, performed by American, or in the case of Air Supply, Australian pop stars, gave me precisely that feeling, that placeness of the place, which made sense of both Manila and the Southern California suburbs that became my subsequent home. There have been many debates in the press and academic circles about whether or not the CPDRC inmates reenacting these dances to pop songs provides a more humane template for prison reform. And I don't really want to go into that conversation right now. We can chat about it later when the music is over. But what I do want to think about in relation to everything we've heard and seen tonight is the work of reenactment. It's a post-colonial idea, a Pinoy idea, but also I would argue a suburban one. I want to encourage us to think about what it would mean to take pleasure in reenactments, especially in what Christine Balance and I, while discussing these videos in another forum, decided to call intimate reenactments. How many of us, and those of us who have come before and after, have tried to do that Thriller dance in our rooms, at a birthday party, or in a club? What about those private performances that transpire when we listen? And, where do those performances go? I mean, these are the kinds of performances I imagine happening in your bedrooms when you're alone in the suburbs, right? Kind of, singing into your hairbrush. It's been kind of, already documented in various cheesy cinematic montage scenes over and over again. But I think that idea of intimate reenactment is important to kind of hold on to. And also the idea that there might be originality found in reenactment. Now, don't get me wrong, being stuck in a suburb or choosing to be in one is not equivalent to being locked up in a provincial rehabilitation and detention center. But perhaps we can find something that could reinvigorate our approach to the suburbs. Something in that tension between reaching everywhere, as this video did, without ever going anywhere, or the idea of finding redemption through repetition. We're going to take as our last example Arnel Pineda, the Pinoy lead singer of a Journey cover band, the archetypal singer in a smoky room, the smell of wine and cheap perfume, who discovered the true meaning of this song, the greatest of suburban redemption anthems, Don't Stop Believin'. Slide right now.
And I love this journey.
That's Arnel. That's Arnel, the new lead singer of Journey. This is a concert in Chile, actually. I don't know who that lady is. I think she's famous. So much fun. Chile, thank you. So repetition doesn't mean everything turns out the same. Kind of like what we opened with when we listened to Little Boxes in several variations. The popular forms that we love, the forms we encountered in our little boxes through other little boxes like TV sets, radios, and even sedans, make it possible to create larger affective communities, even if they seem dispersed and contingent. Queerly, all of this brings us back to our bedrooms, but not in the way you think. It brings us back alone, with our headphones on, in the dark, until we find those precious others who've done the same, who've maybe even swayed the same in nowhere else's or in desperate elsewheres, teaching themselves every painstaking move and note, until we can someday raise our lighters in unison while unmistakable voices sing with a tender, faraway sorrow. Thank you. We're going to close this evening.